Will Brand New Day be a good Spider-Man movie? We don't know. For sure.
We don't know. For sure.
I love Spider-Man and Spider-Man movies, and I'm guessing if you're clicking on this video, you probably do too. Obviously, I'm really excited about the upcoming release of Spider-Man Brand New Day. I will be sat in the theater for it, much like I was sat in the theater for every single one of these movies that I'm going to be talking about today. And I thought it would be fun, in honor of a new Spider-Man movie coming out, to rank every single Spider-Man movie in terms of my own personal opinion. So that is what I'm going to be doing in this video. Before I get into this video and jump on into my rankings, I want to put out a couple of disclaimers. Number one, this video is going to be solely Spider-Man focused. So I understand there are other movies within the general Spider-Man universe, but I will not be talking about them if it's not like Spider-Man is the main character. So sorry to anybody that clicked on here thinking I was going to be talking about Madam Web or the Venom movies or Morbius or whatever. Those are movies to be talked about at a different time. And disclaimer two, I want to make it known that I genuinely am a fan of every single one of these movies, even the ones that people think aren't that great. I have such a fun time watching each one of these movies, and I think each one of these movies has something good about it that I would want to watch it again, honestly. So with that being said, this is a ranking, and somebody's got to be at the bottom and somebody's got to be at the top. But don't come for me. I'm not hating on any of the movies that just happen to fall at the bottom of the ranking. I also want to make it clear that for me, rankings are kind of fluid. My opinions on these movies can change and get mixed around. So this ranking is kind of how I feel about these movies at this place and time in my life right now. I made a Spider-Man ranking on my Letterboxd a couple of years ago when No Way Home was coming out, and I rewatched all of the Spider-Man movies. And I looked at that ranking and saw that there are a few changes. I will put a side by side, I guess, at the end of this video so you could see kind of what changed. So don't come for me if you don't like my number one choice or if you don't like the way that I ranked the movies. I'm just here to have a good time, and let me know how you would rank the movies in the comments. But with all that being said, and with all that out of the way, let's jump right on into the rankings with my bottom ranking. Coming in the number 10 spot, we have Spider-Man 3. I know, listen. I know there are a lot of hardcore Spider-Man 3 defenders out there because I was reading their reviews yesterday after I did a rewatch of a lot of these movies. And honestly, I could see the point of what some of these people are saying, and I can actually see why some of these people really love this movie, even though it comes in at number 10 for me. Listen, I think this movie is definitely a viewing experience. From what I've seen from people's reaction at the time when this movie came out to now, there's quite a lot of people that find this movie a bit cringy because they think it is a little bit too campy. Now, I actually enjoy the camp because I think without the camp, this movie is a bit of a mess, so at least the campiness brings us a little bit of goofiness to laugh at. And one thing I really like about Sam Raimi's take on all three Spider-Man movies that he made is that he goes a little bit campy and goofy. And for a comic book movie, I kind of see the vision in the take. Spider-Man 3 takes the goofiness to the extreme. They were bold, and I think that's what makes the movie so funny. Like, there are some truly hilarious moments and lines in this movie. Bully Maguire, when Peter Parker is turning into Venom or whatever, And they have that shot where he like looks in the mirror and he like puts the emo bangs in his face and is like, now that's telling us that he's evil now. It's just so hilarious. The dancing in the street scenes, absolutely hilarious. Some of the one-liners in this movie are just so ridiculously funny. You can't not enjoy this movie on rewatch because you have these moments that I just think are so ridiculous that it makes the movie so fun. Like, I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye. I mean, come on. That's so funny.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Eddie, when he goes to the church to pray for the death of Peter Parker because Peter Parker made him lose his job, that's hilarious, actually. That is such a funny thing to do. Eddie Brock was the original hater. Overall, without the silliness, it would be a hard watch because I think the writing of this movie is truly all over the place. I don't even think that it was the fact that they had too many villains. I think they were just doing too much. They have these interesting storylines of how the villains affect Peter Parker and how that moves his character development forward. But when they all get thrown together in the same movie, they all just feel rushed. Everything doesn't feel like we really see the development. And so that's why the movie, in my opinion, feels so messy. Whereas I like the Sandman stuff. I don't care for the retconning of the first movie. I like the idea of what the Sandman represents and having Peter's battle with the Sandman also be this battle with learning how to forgive. But I think they should have maybe went the route of having Flint Marko kill somebody else that was close to Peter Parker. Also, the Harry stuff is kind of hilarious because for some of the movie, we need Harry out of the way because we have other stuff going on. So he conveniently gets amnesia for about half the movie and then turns back into Harry the bad guy, sort of. At the end. And then his development happens so fast because they really have this butler character come in and say, actually, you know the thing that you've been mad about for 2 whole movies and saying that you want to make Spider-Man pay for killing your dad? Actually, I saw what happened and that wasn't what happened. And the writing feels so frustrating in that moment because what do you mean this butler has just been sitting on this information the entire time? And what do you mean that's all it took for Harry to be like, oh, now Harry's a good guy? And while I do like Harry developing back into and becoming friends again with Peter Parker, and I like the ending where Harry sort of then becomes somebody who sacrifices his life for Peter Parker, I just think it happens way too fast and it just feels a bit messy. And also the Venom stuff I like in the sense that Peter Parker is unlikable at the beginning of this movie. I like the bold choice of making your main character start out in this unlikable way and showing what happens when you let Spider-Man kind of go to your head and get this big ego, and how Venom or the symbiote sort of amplifies these bad qualities until it makes him look inward at himself and see that he needs to change as a person. But that could have been a whole separate movie in itself. There's just way too much to be doing all 3 of these plot lines. And I don't even think it's the fact that it's the 3 villains. I think it's the fact that they want each villain to represent something in Peter Parker's life, which I think is cool. But because of that, all of the storylines just feel like they get rushed. And the development of Peter Parker through all of these storylines just feels so rushed, in my opinion. And that's what makes the movie so messy. And it's not Peter Parker dancing in the street because, come on, guys, that's hilarious. Anyways, I talked for too much about that, so let's move on to the next movie in my ranking. Coming in at number 9 on my pyramid, we have The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And first of all, I want to put it out right here that I am The Amazing Spider-Man defender simply because I love both Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield, and I love their performances in both Amazing Spider-Man movies. And at the time when these were coming out and people were saying that they weren't that good, I was in the streets fighting for my life, telling everybody, no, you just don't get it. The opinions out there in the streets on like who's the best Spider-Man, who's the best Peter Parker, a lot of people say Tobey is the best Peter Parker, Andrew was the best Spider-Man in the suit, Tom Holland is the best of both worlds. But I will die on this hill that I don't see why people don't like Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. I think he's a great in the Spidey suit, and I think he's a great Peter Parker. Just because he rides a skateboard doesn't mean that he's not still perfectly awkward and nerdy. Go rewatch these movies, I swear, I stand by what I said. Anyway, getting into The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think there are some really great aspects of this movie. I've seen a lot of people put this movie as their last place in their ranking, and the reason why it's not in my last place is because there are some saving graces. Number one, I already talked about Andrew and Emma. Honestly, them as Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, they're so good as these characters. They have more chemistry in this Spider-Man movie than I've seen in most rom-coms that have come out within the past 5 to 10 years. It's crazy. Also, I want to make note because I think the visual effects teams and the cinematographer of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 were really working to try and create something that the fans would like. I think it is notable to say that the first Amazing Spider-Man movie was shot on digital, but this one was shot entirely on film. And I really think that they were putting in the work to try and make a movie that looked good and different from a lot of the stuff that was going on at the time. And it just feels like such a choice that they wanted to shoot it on film. And also the visual effects and the action sequences in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it's some of the best of any Spider-Man movie. I'm telling you, they have these really great slow motion effects. One of the opening shots in this movie where it's like the first time we see Spider-Man swinging through New York. It is one of truly the best Spider-Man swinging through New York scenes I've ever seen. The visual effects in this movie just are simply amazing. And I feel like we don't get this kind of stuff anymore because a lot of these visual effects artists are being let go and fired. There was just like a bunch of people that got let go by Marvel recently. They also are very underpaid. So a lot of the Marvel movies that have come out recently they don't look very good, especially with their CGI and visual effects. This movie looks good. It's like, why can't we have stuff like this? However, I do think, unfortunately, the writing is this movie's biggest downfall. The writing is a little bit incoherent, in my opinion, and very disconnected. Number one, I find it interesting that a lot of Spider-Man movies don't really get into Peter Parker's parents or, his sort of working through what happened to his parents. And I kind of like that the Amazing Spider-Man movie goes into that a little bit, but I don't like the way that it's done in this movie. I don't like all the stuff that's going on in this movie. And at the same time, Peter Parker is discovering a secret laboratory that his dad went to that's in a subway car underground in the subway. What was that? What was that truly? His dad being able to upload a file while the plane was crashing, absolutely hilarious. The on again, off again of Peter and Gwen, I think, is a bit messy. The way they end the last movie with Peter breaking up with Gwen and then saying that he's going to get back together, we all know, but those are the best kind. That scene.
Yeah, but those are the best kind.
They're together at the start of this movie and then they break up and then they kind of get back together and then they kind of break up and then they kind of get back together. I feel like the back and forth, a little bit messy. I don't know. I think the script could have been done so much better. The Electro stuff too, while I think Electro was cool, I think he went from misunderstood guy to cartoonishly evil villain so quickly. The needle drops also are insane. So I guess this movie came out in 2014. There's a Philip Phillips song, and watching it back, it does not hold up, especially because the movie wants to convince me that Peter Parker canonically was listening to Philip Phillips in his headphones when he got sad. It's so funny. The stuff with Harry, I couldn't really get on board with either. I don't think we got to, as an audience, actually see or know the relationship with Peter. They seem like strangers who aren't really good friends, and I don't know. I didn't really care for the Harry stuff in this movie, honestly. I think they could have taken that out or done it better. We do get some really great lines like, "You're a fraud, Spider-Man," but I think truly my favorite vocal stems from The Amazing Spider-Man have to be, "That's a question. That's a question." And one of the best vocal stems of all time, "We don't know for sure."
That's a question. That's a question. We don't know. For sure.
And I think the visuals are really fun, so that's why this movie comes in at number 9 for me. Coming in at number 8 for me is the original Spider-Man. Now, this is actually one of the things that kind of got moved around, I think, from my last list. I thought it would be higher up. I'm also a little bit further removed from it because I haven't seen it as recently as I've seen some of the other movies on the list. So that could also be a reason why it is much lower. I think for the nostalgia factor, it's good. And for an origin story, it's good. I enjoy this movie. Willem Dafoe is the standout. I mean, Willem Dafoe is the standout in a lot of stuff that he does. Let's be for real. I've never seen a bad Willem Dafoe performance. And in this movie, he just makes the whole thing. I like the campiness, like I said, of the Sam Raimi movies. I think it's fun. I do like Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker. I don't think I like him as much as I like Andrew as Peter Parker, which may be a hot take. But in the Spidey suit, in all of these Spider-Man movies, we often see the classic character of Spider-Man. He's making a lot of quips and jokes as he's fighting bad guys and what have you. But a lot of times in these Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, I can't get on board with the way he is in the Spidey suit because the quips, I don't know, it just comes off more awkward to me than like fun. Whereas like when Andrew and Tom do it, it seems like Peter Parker's having a good time. He has this like confidence sort of when he's in the suit. I don't know why, but I just can't get fully on board with the quippiness that happens with this specific version. And I don't know if that's just the delivery or maybe the lines were a little bit too cheesy or maybe it was a direction, but that's how I feel when I'm watching the original trilogy movies. It does feel very of the time in terms of the stuff that's happening. Like there's a Macy Gray concert if you haven't seen the movie in a while, which is so early 2000s, but you know what? I enjoy it. There's not much more I could say. I think they did a good job as an origin story. I really do. And I think the origin story part of this movie is done probably better than in The Amazing Spider-Man. But that's just because The Amazing Spider-Man feels like it's reheating the origin story nachos. But, you know, overall, this is fun and it's nostalgic and it's number 8 on my list. Coming in at number 7 on the pyramid is Spider-Man Far From Home. This was another recent move around, and it's another movie that I haven't seen as recently as some of the other movies on the list, but taking a step back and especially trying to compare it with all these other Spider-Man movies, I had to rank it a little bit lower just because I don't see myself wanting to really rewatch this as much as I would rewatch some of the other movies on this list. I do think there are some really high points in this movie. I love, first of all, the stealth suit. I just think it looks so cool. Secondly, I really think Mysterio is a cool villain. A lot of people have mixed feelings about tying him to Tony Stark being the web that connects them all. Truly, I don't really care about him being tied to Tony Stark, especially because it's within the overall MCU. There's one specific scene in this movie that I absolutely love, and it's that one action sort of sequence when Mysterio is coming at Peter Parker with the images from the drones, the projections. It is so good. That one sequence alone sort of makes the whole movie for me. But outside of that, I just don't think this movie is as memorable and has as many moments as some of the other ones do. I like that Peter Parker is sort of dealing with the death of Tony Stark and trying to move forward from that and figure out who he is in a world without Tony Stark and how, you know, is he going to be the next Tony Stark, feeling like he has to fill the shoes. I think that's an interesting plot line for this movie and for Peter Parker's character arc. I just don't know how I feel about the overall of this movie because these MCU Spider-Man movies tend to be a little more lighthearted, although they do still cover the heavier Spider-Man themes, but they tend to be more like lighthearted and fun. Sometimes I just get a little bit thrown off with how flippantly these people talk about the blip and being blipped. And I think that's such an interesting thing to explore, but the movie more so explores it in a funny, lighthearted type of way. Like they talk about how Aunt May was helping people who were displaced from their homes because they got blipped, and then when they came back, obviously someone else is now living in their home. They probably don't have bank accounts anymore. They don't have their jobs anymore. How do these people start living their lives again? There's so many interesting like street level sort of ramifications of what happened in the blip that could have been interesting to explore in a Spider-Man movie, because Spider-Man does often do some smaller street level protecting of the people. But this movie still feels like grand MCU in a way, with Mysterio being connected to Tony Stark and everything. Since this was the first movie after Endgame, I believe, I wish they would have taken and used Spider-Man as a street level hero to show how people were affected by everything that happened in the events of Infinity War and Endgame on the street level. I think that would have been so cool. But instead, this movie still feels like it's still in that grand, high stakes, bigger picture of the MCU, if that makes any sense. But anyway, I think overall it's a fun movie, and we will move on. Coming in at number 6 on the pyramid, we have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I really love these Into the Spider-Verse movies, but I more recently watched Across the Spider-Verse, and maybe it's recency bias, but I'm a little higher up on that movie, which is why Into the Spider-Verse seems kind of mid-level on this list, and maybe a lot of people think it should be higher. But for me, this is kind of where it lands, but I think it is a great movie. One thing I love about the Spider-Verse movies are the way that they do the art style. For an animated adaptation of something that is coming from a comic book, this is exactly how I would expect the movie to be animated. And the way that not only do they have this really cool art style throughout the movie, but, and I'll talk about this a little more when I talk about Across the Spider-Verse, they really do put in the effort to have some really creative shots. The shot composition and how some of these frames are made are so good and creative, and you just don't see a lot of that in animated movies these days. So it feels so much more cinematic because you really get these shots where they're trying to be cinematic and tell the story with the shot. I also like that they're not afraid to shy away from the heavier themes of Spider-Man the character, because a lot of people would think that an animated movie is more geared toward kids, and the Spider-Verse movies definitely don't feel like that because they don't shy away from showing a lot of these bigger themes, especially for Miles and his character development. I also love that it's a multiverse movie, okay? And dare I say it's one of the best multiverse movies that we have, because there are quite a few multiverse movies that have come out, and some of them just don't do it like they're doing it in Into the Spider-Verse. So that is why Into the Spider-Verse is coming in at number 6 on my list. Moving on, coming in at number 5 on the pyramid, we have The Amazing Spider-Man. And now listen, I did tell you and I did warn you that I am an Amazing Spider-Man truther, okay? So that's why it has to be pretty high up on the list. I support these movies, and I know a lot of people don't, and I understand why people don't. I truly think this movie in particular, The Amazing Spider-Man, its downfall is the first 40 minutes when they're redoing the Spider-Man origin story. And I think that's why a lot of people couldn't get on board when this one was coming out, is because they felt like it was reheating Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi's nachos. And I kind of agree, because really they have to do like the with great power comes great responsibility scene, except for they don't want to specifically have Uncle Ben say that, because then it would feel too much like copying. So they just have a terrible monologue of Uncle Ben saying like, if you could do good things, you should do that. And that's really the Uncle Ben monologue in this movie. It's not good. The line he says is, you have a moral obligation to do good things. It just does not hit the same as with great power comes great responsibility. And it's giving the, can I copy your homework, just change it up a bit so the teacher doesn't notice. And so what we get is this like less good version of this iconic line, which we didn't need to put this in there. And what I find interesting about the Amazing Spider-Man movies is that they often talk about Peter Parker's parents. And instead of redoing the Uncle Ben death and showing how Peter Parker got his powers, if we had started the movie just after kind of that had happened, and we could still kind of explore Peter Parker trying to learn more about his parents and being angry over his uncle's death and stuff. We don't need to re-see the origin, in my opinion. But I do like this movie. First of all, Flash in this movie, I like that we give Flash some character development and how he starts off as your typical high school bully jock archetype. But I like that the day after his uncle died, Peter kind of comes at Flash and he says, "Your uncle died, I'm sorry." And we actually see almost like humanizing this character that usually doesn't get humanized when it's done in this sort of archetype of like mean bully. We kind of get to see Flash developing and trying to be better. And I really appreciated that about this movie. And it seems like Peter and Flash sort of are becoming friends at the end of the movie. And I like that direction that it was going. Specifically, the scene in this movie, the bridge scene where Peter Parker saves the little boy on the bridge and he takes off his mask and gives it to the little boy. Absolute cinema. One of my favorite scenes in any Spider-Man movie is that particular scene because it just feels so true to Spider-Man the character when he takes off his mask and he says, "I'm just a regular guy," and he saves the kid. It's stuff like that that puts this movie a little bit higher up on the list than some of these other movies for me, because when I think of this movie, I remember scenes like that. The scene where Peter Parker climbs through Gwen Stacy's window and he's all beaten and bruised and bloody changed lives on Tumblr in 2012, and that's all I'll say about that. I also like the way that Gwen Stacy is written in these Amazing Spider-Man movies. I like that she is sort of an accomplice to Spider-Man, whereas one of the things that I don't quite love about the Sam Raimi trilogy is how the MJ character is often written, because she never gets anything good. She's always having something horrible happen in her life, and then at the same time, she's always getting kidnapped by some crazy villain using her to lure Spider-Man into a fight. And I like that Gwen Stacy is part of helping Spider-Man accomplish whatever he's going to accomplish. I like that in this movie, she's a part of getting the antidote to Peter Parker, and she helps get everybody out of the Oscorp building. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, she helps Peter turn the power grid back on or whatever, and I like that she's sort of involved in the action in her own way instead of just being the typical damsel in distress. I just enjoy seeing her character more so than I like MJ as a character. I just don't really love what they did with her in the Sam Raimi movies, because I wanted to see her character get more. And the last thing I'll say about this is that I like that Peter Parker can go to Gwen and ask her for help, which he does in this movie in particular. He knows how cool and smart she is, and he's not afraid to ask her to help him. It feels like he needs her in order to defeat the villain. He couldn't do it without her. And I like that little bit of giving her character sort of this importance in the grand scheme of things. Why this movie is a bit lower on my pyramid though is because I do think some of the writing is not the best. I think Dr. Connors could be an interesting villain, but I wish they really would have tied him more into Peter's character development. I also don't fully understand Dr. Connors' motivations in this movie. I think it's kind of silly. I understand why he would do the test on himself and why he, is trying to regrow his arm. That all makes sense. But then when he goes full, and I'm going to turn everybody in the city into a lizard, I think that's a bit silly. Overall, though, I just think that without Andrew and Emma, I'm not sure if these movies would have done as well. They do have some great moments, but I really think Andrew and Emma carry these movies. I really wish the writing was just done a little bit differently. But overall, I'm having a good time, and I'm not hating on the Amazing Spider-Man movies like a lot of people do. So let's move on. Now, before I get into my top 4, I just want to say that up until last night, I was switching the rankings of these 4 movies around. So just know that the rankings are pretty fluid, but this is what I landed on today. So coming in at number 4 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, I watched this movie pretty recently, and I was having a great time. It's all the good things that I liked about Into the Spider-Verse. Maybe it's recency bias, and because I've seen it more recently than Into the Spider-Verse. I'm more high up on it, but I like the art style. I like the way that they compose the shots to get these really creative looks and to tell the story. There's this really cool shot at the beginning when Gwen Stacy is riding the subway and we see a reflection of Miles on the window behind her. It's stuff like that that I think is done so well that you just don't see in other animated movies. I really like Gwen Stacy's story in this movie. I like what she's dealing with, the stuff with her dad. I like Miles's story. I like that he's essentially dealing with the trolley problem. And it's like, do you save your dad and put everybody else at risk? And I know that's going to carry over into the next movie, which I'm excited to see. I think my biggest thing that I don't like about this movie is that it's only a part one. And I wanted it to be a complete story. And when it was over, and I was having such a great time, when it ended, I was mad that it ended because it just felt like it ended in the middle of the story, which it did. And so that's my biggest problem with this movie. And I don't even think that's much of a problem. I just think it means that I liked it so much that I wanted the rest. The ending to this movie, when we get the reveal of the alternate universe Miles, is so good. And also, I like Donald Glover coming back to play Aaron Davis in this movie as the live action universe version of Aaron Davis. This is how I want a multiverse movie to be done. The clips that they showed of both Andrew Garfield, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, I like the little touches like that. This is just like a really great movie. And they really do a great job of having a very strong sense of the characters. The Spider-Verse movies have some of the best character arcs, and the way that they explore and have those characters develop, I think, are really fun to see. Coming in third on the pyramid, third overall high score, is Spider-Man Homecoming. And now, I didn't think that this would be a bit of a hot take. I wouldn't really call it a hot take, but I was looking at a lot of other people's rankings, and a lot of people are kind of down on the MCU Spider-Man movies. I, in particular, really love Spider-Man Homecoming. One of my favorite things about this movie is that within the MCU, especially at the time when things were starting to feel so big, we have this movie that the stakes feel really small, but it doesn't feel small in a way that's boring to the audience. The stakes are small, but they feel big for Peter Parker. And that's what I really loved about this movie, is it felt like it was getting back to the roots of a character that really cares about everything that's going on at the street level. The overall storyline with the Vulture doesn't feel anything that's big in the grand scheme of the MCU, but at the time, to Peter Parker, it was big and it's important. And I really enjoy the scene where Spider-Man has this argument with Tony Stark, and he's saying, well, you didn't care. I tried to tell you this was happening, and nobody really cared to do anything. So I had to do something. He feels like a lot of the bigger heroes don't need to be concerned with this kind of stuff, but I like that Peter Parker is concerned with the stuff that's going on, even down on a much smaller level. And the villain feels big to him because he's so young. And I like the way that the MCU Spider-Man movies portray Peter Parker, Spider-Man, to be so young. And I think as a trilogy, at least the first three, it feels like a coming of age sort of over the first three movies. And we kind of get what feels like an origin story in Peter Parker's arc across all three of these movies put together. He does feel very young, and everything sort of feels more realistic to what I would imagine Spider-Man and his friends to be, with characters like Ned and MJ and even Flash. I love the way that they're done, especially for Flash. I like the way that Flash is portrayed in these movies because it feels like, oh yeah, this is exactly how I would expect a bully who's also like going to Midtown Science to act and be. In this movie, in particular, the Michael Keaton of it all is amazing. The reveal was truly shocking when you watch the movie for the first time and you get that scene where he opens the door and realizes that the Vulture is her dad. Following that moment, one of my favorite scenes in any Spider-Man movie is that scene where Michael Keaton is driving him in the car and both the Vulture and Peter Parker know who each other are, and they know it's about to go down after this, and the tension in that scene is done so well. And I like Peter Parker's fight with the Vulture at the end, because there's this moment where he doesn't have his Iron Man suit anymore. He was relying on the suit. He didn't fully believe in himself. And he has this really great scene where the building is toppled on him and he's screaming for help and nobody's there. And that scene of where he's like, come on, Spider-Man, come on. And he lifts all of the debris off of himself to continue to fight. One of my favorite Spider-Man scenes out of all the Spider-Man movies. I think it's such a great moment and such a great arc for this Peter Parker, especially because we didn't see this Peter Parker's origin story. So this is a great way for us to sort of see that original development. He's still early on in his days of being Spider-Man. He's also learning to believe in himself and he's wanting to do the right thing. And I really love the route that they went with Spider-Man Homecoming, not redoing the origin story, but we still get to see these great moments. I like the fact that he had to be without his suit sort of at the end of the movie, you know, and he doesn't have like this computer robot, you know, helping him like Tony Stark does. And he was doing it on his own for one of the first times since becoming Spider-Man. And I think that's important, and I like that they included that in there. Some people don't like that he feels so young, but I feel like that adds to the story because at the end of the day, Peter Parker is just a kid. And I like that they took that and they used it to sort of make this high school coming of age story. And I love coming of age movies, so maybe that's why Spider-Man Homecoming is so high up on this list, because it feels like a very fun high school coming of age movie at the same time as it's also a Spider-Man movie. Coming in next at number 2 on my pyramid is, in fact, Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, the previous time I made this list was almost right after Spider-Man No Way Home came out, and I was so high up on this movie that I put it at my number 1. And for this video in particular, I really tried to take a step back. I rewatched this movie and I tried to rewatch it from an outside perspective of putting the nostalgia of this movie aside. Is this a good movie? Because a lot of people say it's just nostalgia bait, it's fan service. So I do think it holds up. Now, maybe they just got me, you know, maybe they baited me with the nostalgia and I fell for it. And I like all their little inside jokes and references to the older movies. And I like Tobey Maguire and I like Andrew Garfield and I like seeing all 3 Spider-Man together, and they got me, and it was fan service served up on a silver platter and I ate it up and left no crumbs. Okay? So maybe that's why I like the movie so much. And is that a crime? I mean, come on. Objectively, when I was rewatching the movie, I do think there are big high points of this movie that I think is so rewatchable. I still had a great time, and that's why this movie is coming in at number 2 on my list. I liked the old music cues for the Tobey and Andrew Spider-Man that they mixed in with this movie, making references to the memes of the first movie, like, I'm something of a scientist myself. I know they baited me with that, and I fell for it, and you know what? I laughed at it again on rewatch, so maybe I'm the dummy who fell for it. I love Willem Dafoe in this movie. He carries like every movie he's in. I love Norman's on sabbatical, honey. Him being tied to Peter's arc of Peter wanting to get revenge on Norman Osborn for what he did to Aunt May, and Peter having to go through similar things that the other Peter Parker had to go through, you know, in Spider-Man 3. I really like the storyline of Aunt May being the one who encouraged Peter to help these people, although he didn't have to. He could have just sent them back to die. Peter's arc in this movie is done pretty well for a Spider-Man movie. I like Aunt May's death and how that's going to propel us into seeing more development for this character. And I like where this movie ends, where not only does Spider-Man lose his Aunt May, but he's also losing his friends too. So we're going into the next movie with him essentially being on his own and having no one. And I think that's such an interesting point in the story. I also really love the other Peter Parkers coming in to help him. I do. And I love that they're also getting closure in their own ways. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Peter 3, Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man, saves MJ. To the Amazing Spider-Man fans like me, it's kind of what we needed. Not only that, it's sort of this closure for that particular character, because we were supposed to have more Amazing Spider-Man movies and we lost them. So we never really got to see that version of Peter Parker get his closure for what happened to Gwen Stacy. And that scene is so important to me in No Way Home, when he is able to save MJ. He wasn't able to save his MJ, which he refers to Gwen Stacy earlier in the movie. He calls her my MJ. I lost Gwen, she was my MJ. And he's able to save that for this version of Peter Parker and sort of have this redemption. It's so good. That scene alone makes the movie for me. However, I do think there's some silly moments in this. I'm not the biggest fan of Doctor Strange. I understand why he's important to this movie and why we needed him to bring in the whole multiverse aspect of everything. I don't really care for his scenes in this. I understand he's important to the story, but I don't know. I wish that could have been written a little bit differently. There's some of the villains that I think are kind of giving nothing in this. I understand we're seeing these old villains come back, but Dr. Connors really was kind of just there. Flint Marko was also another guy who's really kind of just there. And our big villains really are Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina, which are the ones that probably people were most excited to see. But these other villains in the background, they don't get much to do in this movie. And it's like, we don't really care much for them. The Peters coming together and solving all of the villains' problems in like 10 minutes is kind of hilarious. When the old Peter Parker stepped in through the portals and they have this bit of pause because they knew that audiences would be reacting to this in the theater, I think is kind of hilarious when you're on rewatch. It's almost like when you watch those videos where it's episodes of Friends, but they take out the laugh track. They say one line and they pause for the laughter and the audience reaction. That's kind of how the Peters walking through the portal feels upon rewatch. So it's a little bit goofy, but you know what? I'm here for it because I'm just glad that they brought the other Peters back. The one thing I really don't love about this movie is the fight at the end. It feels so kind of falling into the line of what a lot of MCU movies nowadays fight scenes look like. It's not the best done action CGI sequence I've ever seen. It kind of is just falling into that MCU typical trap that a lot of these movies have fallen into. And I'm not blaming the VFX people because, like I said, I know a bunch of them are overworked and underpaid, and a lot of them are getting laid off. I'm blaming Marvel because they have these big budgets, but they can't pay to have better effects done in the way that they should look, because all these action sequences within these MCU movies nowadays are all starting to look the same. And I feel the same is true for the big action sequence at the end of No Way Home. It's what brings this movie down a notch for me. And I think that's just an overall side effect of the MCU nowadays, unfortunately. The thing is, I know that they can do these movies better, because one of my absolute favorite scenes in No Way Home is just after Aunt May dies. They have this beautiful shot of Peter in front of the big screen, and it's J. Jonah Jameson on the big screen talking about Spider-Man being a menace or whatever, and it's in the rain. The lighting in that scene is so good. That scene is absolute cinema. I love the cinematography in that scene in particular. I love the red lighting and the blue lighting on Peter's face. I love the rain. And it's like, how can we have something like that scene and then go have a fight scene that just doesn't look that great? It's like they have the tools to do great and creative things, and they don't always do that, which is what kind of knocks this movie down a peg for me. But why this movie is so high up is not just because of the nostalgia, but I think the overall storyline is pretty good. I like these actors coming back, including Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe. It's so fun to see them play these characters again, and I like that Peter goes on this arc in this movie, and I like the other Peters helping him develop and get to the point that he needs to be and being there for him. And I like the ending of the movie and the spot that he is in at the end of the movie. It truly feels like the end of an era, and this is finally the ending of that origin story, and we're going to move into a new era for this version of Peter Parker, which is so exciting and also a little bit sad. Overall, I probably did fall for the trap, guys. I fell for the nostalgia trap because I enjoy all the Peters having conversations together and sort of helping each other. Like we get this really interesting conversation between Peter 3 and Peter 2, and it seems like Peter 2 was trying to help Peter 3, move on after Gwen's death because it feels like Peter 3 never moved on. And I like that this movie is giving us a little bit of closure for that because really they killed Gwen Stacy and they promised us that we would see more movies and then they never made more movies. So we were deprived of finishing that arc for specifically that version of Peter Parker. And I like that this movie gives the fans of those movies a little bit of seeing that character arc that we never got to see. Now, moving on. And finally, we are at number 1 on the pyramid, number 1 overall high score on my list. You probably know what it is right now. It's the only movie I haven't talked about, and it is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. I feel like people looking back on this movie generally have better opinions of it. I do think out of a lot of superhero movies, this is one of the best ones, not just out of all the Spider-Man movies, but out of superhero movies in general. It's truly up there with a well done story. And what's surprising to me is that this was not number 1 on my list going into this ranking. I think I had this at number 3 from my old list, and I moved it up to number 1 after rewatching it because I had such a good time, and I absolutely love the vision that Sam Raimi brings to this movie. Like I said, I love the campiness. I always enjoy the campiness. But I think what I appreciate about these movies and this one in particular is that they weren't afraid to make bold choices. And they were going for a specific feel and a specific look and a specific vision and a specific tone. When that is executed and done well, it makes the movie overall so much better. And I think a lot of movies nowadays in general are afraid to have a vision and to make these kind of bold choices and to get creative with things because they're afraid that these choices are going to flop and fail and become a meme and be made fun of. But here's where we see how taking the risk can pay off. And I more so appreciate when creators take the risk versus playing it safe. And I think that's what really makes this movie so good, is that the tone of the movie really comes across because in every aspect, in the writing, in the way that it was filmed, in the cinematography, in every aspect of this movie, they were trying to capture Sam Raimi's vision, and it is absolutely amazing. The scene with the reactor is one of the best scenes in this movie. One thing that Sam Raimi brings to this movie as a horror director is he really kind of goes full horror in some of these sequences, and I was eating it up. The reactor scene, they have this really cool shot where everybody is kind of being pulled towards the reactor. There's things coming off the wall. They have this shot where the glass shatters and the glass is flying towards Doc Ock's wife. And we see her screaming in the reflection on a shard of glass as it's moving towards her. Absolute cinema. Like, they just simply don't do this kind of stuff in a lot of movies nowadays. Like, they don't put in the efforts to have this really cool kind of sequence in there, and it feels so much like a horror movie in the way a lot of these scenes within this are shot, in the way that there's always some girl screaming. I mean, we gotta give props to Sam Raimi because I think he hired probably so many actors on this movie that are like regular horror actors, because there are so many just random people in this movie whose job is to run and scream at the camera. And it's just so good. The scene after the reactor explosion, I have in my notes smoking duck meme. I think that's the only way to like describe the feeling that I got when I was rewatching this. Absolute cinema, absolute horror movie cinema, which is something you wouldn't really expect in a fun, campy superhero movie. And I love the way this surgery scene where the arms are attacking the doctors, There's this really cool shot where this lady is being pulled away into darkness and she's clawing the ground as she's screaming and being pulled back. It's so horror movie coded. And I know Sam Raimi is an esteemed horror movie director, and I love that he brought his horror background into this movie, into these sequences, because it is just so fun and they're done so well. The goofiness is there, and it's kind of silly and funny, and I enjoy it because it feels very comic book movie. A real line from this movie is, "You stuck your webs in my business for the last time." It feels so cartoon villain, but I don't know, I just like that they played into it, and it just makes it fun. In this movie, it feels fun, okay? They also do an actual freeze frame in this movie, which took me off guard because they do it only once, I believe. But it's stuff like that. Sam Raimi in this movie loves like a quick zoom on something. I love that he makes these choices with the camera to add to the overall feel of the movie. And I think it just adds more character and life to the movie. There's these interesting shots that he puts in there, and you just don't see a lot of directors of superhero movies nowadays. I know not all of them. I know there's been a couple of good ones that have come out recently, but in the bulk of like the mass amount of superhero movies that always come out every year, you don't see a lot of people making these sort of creative choices and trying to do something different. In this movie, what it feels like is that it was doing something different. And I know it's kind of playing off of the first one. I think the first one sort of sets up that tone, but this one just homes in on it and it executes it so well. And I think it paid off for them in the long run. And also, I think this is one of the best arcs for Peter Parker. I like that he's losing his powers and he's thinking of giving up Spider-Man, and he's seeing how his real life sort of gets back on track when he gives it up. And I like that arc of him finding his way back and the reason why he does what he does. They have this really great scene where he saves this kid from a burning building, and it's when he kind of has lost his powers, so to say. And so he's just doing that on his own because he cares about people so much, and it just feels so quintessential Peter Parker. And what he does is that he just cares about people, and he does things not because he has power, but because he's just a good person. I think that scene kind of sums it up. And then afterwards in that scene, we hear that there was someone else in the building that didn't make it out. And that's kind of this catalyst for him realizing that he needs to get back into being Spider-Man again. It's so good. That's what also makes a good Spider-Man movie, is when the storyline and the development of Peter Parker in particular is done well and in a compelling and interesting way. And this is one of my favorite ones. So that's why this movie is so high up. I think one of the best scenes out of any Spider-Man movie, and I know that I highlighted quite a few of my favorite overall scenes, this one might take the cake, and it is the train scene. And I have a lot of favorites, but this one is just so memorable. And maybe it's because nostalgia of the movie. I was really young when this movie came out, but I remember going to see it in theaters, and I specifically remember this scene. It left a mark in my memory. The people on the train having this moment of realizing he's just a kid when he doesn't have his mask on. This scene would never fly today. By the way, in the panopticon of today's society, the scene would not work. But it absolutely works for this time where the people of New York are like, don't worry, we're going to keep your secret, after finding out Spider-Man's a kid. And then the New Yorkers wanting to step in and like step in front of him to help him fight the villain, I think is so cool. I love when the Spider-Man movies highlight the people of New York. And this is one of those moments where like the people of New York are like, if you want him, you have to go through us. And it just feels so fun. And New York, even though the villain immediately shoves them all to the side. So in the grand scheme of things, they did nothing. Like their actions did not help really at all. But it was the thought that counts. And I love that scene in particular is in there. When the mask comes off, it kind of puts everything into perspective for everybody, as he's not this entity of Spider-Man anymore, this super person. It's, oh, he's just a kid. And I like that sort of moment. So I think on rewatch, Spider-Man 2 was just so fun, and that's why I moved it up on my list. Now, if I had to make this list in a few months from now or even in a year from now, will Spider-Man 2 still be at the top spot? I don't know for sure. But I think it's still always going to be within the top 2 or 3, honestly, because it is so well done. It's just classic superhero movie. And it is so fun. I'm having a good time every time I'm watching Spider-Man 2. So that is my Spider-Man rankings. And I will show on the screen now my original Letterboxd ranking for these movies. I think this was post No Way Home and pre Across the Spider-Verse. So that's why Across the Spider-Verse might be missing from that. And that's how the movies have changed. In my opinion, I had a great time talking about Spider-Man. I'm very excited for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Please be nice to me about my opinions in the comments, okay? But also share your Spider-Man opinions and share your rankings in the comments. I would love to know, since I think it's a fun topic to talk about, and I know a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about a lot of these different movies. But with all that being said, thank you for listening to me yap about Spider-Man for however long this video has gone. I fear this might be a bit longer than I originally thought it was going to be. So anyways, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching. Please leave a like if you liked this video, leave me a comment, click on my channel and check out some of my other stuff. And if you like some of that other stuff, you might want to subscribe to my channel so you always know when I post a new video. I do quite a few different things on this channel, so it's a bit of a variety over here, but I'm always talking about TV and movies and pop culture and reality TV and stuff. And with that being said, thank you once again for watching. I will see you in the next one.